From west to east and kingdom to kingdom, you're listening to the Diz Unplugged Connecting with Walt podcast. Connecting with Walt is brought to you by Dreams Unlimited Travel, experts at helping you plan the perfect Disney vacation. Visit them on the web at www.dreamsunlimitedtravel.com. Hello and welcome to episode 9 of the Diz Unplugged Connecting with Walt podcast. I am your host and Diz historian, Michael Bowling. I'm joined by my co-host and producer, Craig Williams, and also by our special guest, David Younger, who's the author of the new book, Theme Park Design and the Art of Themed Entertainment. Now, David is joining us from the United Kingdom. So, David, let us know if we need to speak more loudly due to our length of distance.
I think the Atlantic must be quite calm today because I can hear you fine.
Perfect.
I'll stay that way.
That's wonderful. So, welcome to Connecting with Walt.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
We are delighted. And you are our first guest on Connecting with Walt. So, I don't know, Craig, do we have like a button or something that we give first guests?
We have absolutely nothing. We'll try to see if we can send you away, though, with a lovely gift basket or something. I don't know what the standard is for podcast gifts.
And a box of rice-a-roni, the San Francisco treat.
Oh, it'd be from you.
Yes, that's right. So, Craig, how are you today?
Oh, I'm not bad. So I'm kind of thrown off by the time we're actually recording this. So typically you and I are on late at night, but it's a normal time of day for me for once.
Yeah, it's actually, I can see daylight, but where David is, it, of course, is at the end of the day.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's pretty late for me.
Yes. Anyway, David is coming on because we are transitioning into where we're going to start getting into the actual construction of the Magic Kingdom in our upcoming episodes. And David is helping us transition to those topics. So in our previous episode, Up the Creek, Craig and I talked about how vitally important it was for Walt Disney Productions to establish the Reedy Creek Improvement District to construct Project Florida. And after their plans languished for a year after Walt's death, the Imagineers at WED Enterprises were finally able to get back to their planning for the theme park and the resorts after the Reedy Creek legislation was passed and confirmed by the Florida State Supreme Court. So David Younger is joining us on this very special episode of Connecting with Walt to talk about the process of theme park design. And David, would you tell our listeners about yourself and how you came to be an expert in theme park design?
I'm very glad that you give me that title. I think really for me, I guess like a lot of your listeners, it was Disney that made me fall in love with theme park design. But I guess unlike most of your listeners, it was Disneyland Paris that did that for me. Because being in the United Kingdom, I was 5 years old when Disneyland Paris opened. And I really think that was kind of the perfect age to first visit a Disney theme park for me. And especially with it being Disneyland Paris, which at the time was, I think it's still the most beautiful Disney theme park in the world. But at the time, it was just all of the hits that went into Disneyland and into the Magic Kingdom and into Tokyo Disneyland all in one place. And it captured my imagination perfectly. So I was one of those kids that always knew they wanted to go into theme park design. I can still remember drawing theme park maps of my own theme parks when I was 7 years old, and just it was always on my mind.
So is that one of your ultimate goals, is to design a whole theme park of your own?
That would be a dream. I've got lots of ideas, but yeah, that would be a dream.
So in a little while, we're going to get more into advice that you would have for somebody who wants to get into theme park design. But what path did you take in order to learn about theme park design?
Well, actually, for me, because Disney's really, I wanted to work for Disney. Just at some point in my life, I wanted to work for Disney. But being British, that's quite a really difficult thing to do. So when I decided that I was going to go to university, I decided I wasn't going to do theme park design. I thought that's not realistic. It's not going to happen in the UK. I'll instead do film. Film's a bit more broader. There's lots of different things I could apply that to. Theme park design, it's a nice hobby to have, but it's not something I'm going to be able to do for a career. But then what happened is, whilst I was at university doing film, in my second year, the opportunity came up to do an international exchange program. And all I knew is that I was going to be able to go to a university in the United States. And I thought, oh, that's great. I love the United States. Even if I'm not near Disney Park, perhaps I can take a flight out there and go for a few days or something like that. When I found out the university I was going to, it was Cal State University Long Beach, which is, I think it's either the closest or the second closest university there is to Disneyland Resort, California. Just purely by chance, I could drive from the university, from the place I was living, to Disneyland in 20 minutes, and that was just a dream come true for me. So what would happen is I'd have lessons in the morning where we'd learn about, say, the 3-act structure in film, or about scenic design in film, and then go to Disneyland in the afternoon or in the evening, and I begin to see these same techniques that I'm learning about for film existing within Disneyland. Well, and that kind of triggered something for me.
Well, and that's interesting because when Disneyland was designed, they designed it from a filmmaker's point of view.
Well, exactly, yeah. So what I ended up doing in our third year, after I came back from California for my final year at university, in the UK we have to do a third-year dissertation, which is a 10,000-word paper on just really on something that we enjoy, that we can apply to our degree. And so other people on the film course were writing about Casablanca or about Gone with the Wind. I did my 10,000-word paper on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland.
which became a film.
Well, of course, yeah, it did, yeah. But so what I did is I approached Pirates of the Caribbean, the ride, like a film, and I analyzed it from the perspective of the 3-act structure and of the scenic design of it and the plot and everything like that. And that I enjoyed that so much. I kind of realized, gosh, there's got to be more to this. There's so much here. And I had all of the Disney books, of course. I had the Walt Disney Imagineering book. I had the Designing Disneyland book. I had all of these things, but they weren't quite what I wanted. I wanted a full textbook on how to design a theme park. And after the experience of writing this dissertation and enjoying it so much, I kind of realized, well, okay, if this book isn't out there already, I'll write it myself.
And that's what you did.
That's what I did.
Yes, and we're going to talk more about your book, which is remarkable. And what a couple of things that I want to talk about is that one of the things what was interesting is when I was talking to my wife Carol about the show and I was talking about theme park designers and design, is she had no idea that companies other than Disney's Imagineering did theme park design. But actually, even though Disney might have started it, there are many, many companies and many opportunities out there for theme park designers, aren't there?
There absolutely are. There are hundreds of theme park design companies, and really, Disney definitely established the industry. But you have to remember that so many of these Imagineers went off and started their own companies as well. So there are loads of companies out there who have the talent of Walt Disney Imagineering, and some of them work for theme parks that are operating, like Universal Studios has Universal Creative. And Merlin Entertainments, which own the Legoland theme parks, they have Merlin Making Magic, which is their own in-house company. But as well as that, there are hundreds of other independent companies like Thinkwell and BRC Imagination Arts, which even Disney will hire some of these companies for certain things because they have expertise that Disney might not have.
Right, and I know a lot of Disney theme park goers know of Garner Holt, because he's designed a lot of the Disneyland and Disney World attractions, the more recent
Exactly.
ones.
That's the thing. If you want animatronics in your theme park, you want to go to the best of the best, and that's what Garner Holt's company does.
Right. So during the course of our conversation, my experience is really limited to experiencing Disney theme parks. So for our listeners that are probably Disney park fans, my examples are all going to be around Disney's. David's expertise, however, is well beyond the boundaries of a Disney theme park. So don't be surprised if he starts talking to us and giving us examples about other theme parks. And I know some of us would never dream of setting foot in another theme park other than Disney, but you might be surprised to know that some theme parks do a really good job at theming and at attraction development. And David will probably tell us a little about those other parks today, and maybe whet our appetites for visiting them. So, David, maybe the first thing that we need to understand is what is the difference between an amusement park and a theme park?
Okay, so this is a distinction that I'm really that I think is really important. But to answer it, you have to go back to what is theme design, and typically, what we define theme design is. It would be a dimensional story experience unified by a theme. And that sounds pretty grand, but if I just break it down, so by dimensional, I mean that it's in a physical space. So unlike film, which is on a screen, or a book, which is in words, a theme design, you can reach out and touch it. You can walk along the cobblestones. You can feel the wind in your hair. It's dimensional. Then story. Now, obviously, with Disney, all Disney fans know the importance of story, but story can be as little as you are in another place or another time. That's all it has to be. But basically, there is a level of narrative that's added to the design that removes it from what it actually is. And then experience means that everything that happens to you whilst you're part of this is part of the product. So even from the tiniest thing right the way up to a whole roller coaster, it's all important. Everything has to be choreographed and thought of, and then all of that is then unified by a theme. And we'll probably get into what a theme is later, because it's not quite as simple as the typical definition we'd give it. But what you do with that dimensional story experience is you can overlay that onto all sorts of different things. So let's say a hotel can be made into a themed hotel by giving it a story, by changing it. So you're not staying in the middle of the Las Vegas desert. You're actually staying in the middle of Venice, and you can go and ride on the gondolas, and you can go and look at all the statues. There's that level of abstraction. And the difference between a theme park and an amusement park is that theme design is applied to the amusement park. So we might build roller coasters, but it's not meant to be a roller coaster anymore. It's meant to be a bobsled run down the Matterhorn, or it's meant to be a tea train going through the Himalayas that gets attacked by the Yeti, or it's supposed to be a limousine ride through Los Angeles trying to get you to a concert on time. And that's what makes it unique. It's just like Imagineers say that it's like stepping into a film. That's exactly what it is. You're no longer walking into a regular restaurant. You're walking into a restaurant that's in the middle of Polynesia. You're not going on a mechanical spinner ride anymore. You're sitting on the back of Dumbo and flying through the air with a magic feather.
Excellent. And I think that's what we like about theme parks. I mean, what a lot of people say about Disneyland and Disney World is one of the reasons they enjoy it is because it allows them to escape the realities of the real world for a period of time. But then there was a quote in your book from John Hinch that really jumped out at me. And he said, the parks are not about escapism. They are about reassurance. The things can be done right, that you can talk to a stranger in a public place, that a public place can be clean, that you can come out of these experiences and saying, wow, I feel I do feel good. I feel optimistic about the future, optimistic about the world. So, what effect do you think, in your opinion, is a theme park designed to have upon a guest? Is it escapism? Or is it more what John Hench said?
Well, really, it depends on the themed entertainment that the designer is trying to present. So, I mean, even with that definition that John Hench gives, of course, there is an element of escapism. You don't have to worry about your day-to-day job. But there's fun, there's story, there's spectacle, there's thrill, there's play, there's sociability, just going with your friends and family. All of these are important. But what John Hench is getting at there is that this comes down to that definition of theme that I mentioned. So if I was to ask you what theme means in a theme park, most people would say pirates or princesses and fairy tales, cowboys and things like that. But if I was to ask you what the theme of Moby Dick is, you wouldn't say whales. You'd probably say something like the power of obsession or man versus nature. And that's a distinction there. So when theme park designers are talking about theme, they actually mean two different things. The pirates and princesses, that's the manifestation theme. That's the physicality of it. But in addition to that, there's the dramatic theme. And that dramatic theme it's just like a literary theme. It's how is it supposed to make you feel? What is it making you think about? And for Disneyland, lots of people may say, well, what's Disneyland's theme? Is it Disney? Well, not really, because when Disneyland opened, 60% of the attractions weren't based around Disney properties. They were original. And then you might say, well, maybe Disneyland's theme is America, but then it's got a European castle as its centerpiece. And really, John Hench spells it out. Disneyland's theme, just like Magic Kingdom themes and all of the castle parks that Disney has, that theme is reassurance. It's meant to make you feel that the world is all right after all, that people are good and kind, and good will triumph over evil. And it could have been that John Hench and Walt Disney chose an entirely different theme, but that's the one that they chose, and I think that's why Disneyland and the Disney theme parks have been so successful, because that's something that resonates with all of us.
Right, and that was definitely, as Craig and I have talked about on previous episodes, that was Walt Disney's outlook on life, that everything was going to be okay. The future was very optimistic. So it's as you said, it seems only natural that was the overlying theme in his park. So.
Yeah, absolutely. But you also have to remember, though, that Disney have lots of other different theme parks, and it's only the castle parks that really pin down that reassurance theme. Other Disney theme parks have entirely different themes. It's like Epcot, for example, instead of reassurance, it tries to inspire you, and I think that's a really amazing theme to have for a park, to be able to go into a place and think, wow, this is what I could do. There's so much that we've accomplished, and there's so far we can go. And then Disney's Animal Kingdom has themes of the power of nature and the call to action to care about the world, and these are emotional things that we identify with. It's not just the scenery.
Good, yeah, and I want to explore later on in our conversation about the difference that what happened when the Imagineers sat down to design Epcot, because it was their first non-castle Disney park. So we'll explore that a little, because I know you're very well versed in sort of the Disney history of all that. Now, when we're talking about theme parks, a thing that goes on in Southern California is a couple years ago, Knott's Berry Farm started a campaign claiming they were the first theme park. Yet I've always believed that Disneyland was the first theme park. So we have you here, David, to settle this once and for all on Connecting with Walt. Who has the rightful claim to the title? And we're recording this. So this is posterity. Well, who is the world's first theme park?
Well, I have to say, I can't give you an answer to that. Mm-hmm. Because really it depends on how you define the terms. Mm-hmm. So obviously the two contenders are Knott's Berry Farm and Disneyland, But there's also a third contender, and that's Santa Claus Land in Indiana, which later became Holiday World.
Mm-hmm.
And they each have different reasons for it. Now, personally, I would say I would give the claim, if I had to, I would give it to Disneyland. And really, that's because a lot of people might not know this, but the term theme park wasn't coined until 4 years after Disneyland opened. The term theme park wasn't used until 1959. And before that, Disneyland was just called an amusement park. But the very first time that was used, it wasn't even in Disney literature. It was in an industry handbook that was looking to sell all different types of rides. And it was saying that some people might want to start up theme parks like Disneyland. And I think because Disneyland kind of originated that term, the term was coined to describe Disneyland, that's why I'd give it to Disney.
Oh, well, that's good enough for me.
We'll have to take that Knott's Farm sign down at some point.
That's right.
Who's got a ladder?
Along with that sign up at Universal Studios Orlando about Mythos being one of the number one restaurants. So since I think that's a bit dated. Anyway, well, in your book, Theme Park Design and the Art of Themed Entertainment, you detail the process for working on a theme design project. So I don't know if you can give us sort of the 50,000-foot overview of that process, because I was stunned at how remarkably detailed it is and how lengthy it is. So I don't know if you can sort of go through this, because I think most of us, especially those of us who grew up watching Walt Disney on television when he would take us behind the scenes, I think we all thought that, there was Mark Davis sitting there designing the whole attraction and drawing everything out. And then maybe they gave it to Exitencio or the Sherman Brothers to write a song for it. And then they handed it off for it to be constructed. It's clearly much more complex from reading your book. So I don't know if maybe you can come up with like a hypothetical kind of project and sort of walk us through what goes into planning a themed attraction.
Well, absolutely. Like, you have to remember that these are multi-million-dollar attractions. Like, some of them are, if you're going to build a new theme park, that can be over $1 billion. That could be up to $4 or $5 billion. And so the techniques that go into construction all apply to theme park design as well. They're just appended with some extra design stages before construction that make it a bit more magical. But basically, we have to start with the design team, and there are I think 4 key people that you'll find on a design team. Now, the first one is the client. So this is the person that goes to the design company and says, "I want a new attraction built." And in the case of Disney, this is Disney Parks and Resorts. So Disney Parks and Resorts will be the client, and they will go to Walt Disney Imagineering and say, "We would like a new ride." So you can imagine this is the late 60s. Michael, you are the current head of WED Enterprises, as it was at the time, and Parks and Resorts have just come to you to say, "We want a new ride." Now, you in that situation are the executive. So the executive is the person who is looking out for the creative integrity of the project from the design side.
Now I have a question. Is that how vague they are? They just say, "We want an attraction," and maybe they do it differently now than in the 60s, I don't know. But or do they say, "We want an attraction based on, and we want it in this land, and we want it to be a boat ride or a roller coaster ride," or do they just give them carte blanche?
It really depends. Sometimes they will just be allowed to have free reign and just come up with all different ideas. But sometimes they will say a theme park might be losing teenagers, for example, or adults might not be having as much fun in the park. And so they recognize that there are these target audiences that they need to address. Or perhaps they've got a new intellectual property. So a new movie's come out and it's really popular. And so the parks may realize that, we want a ride based around this attraction. Or in some cases, an old attraction might be closing, but they still have that ride system that they want to do something new with. So it really changes. It can be almost anything.
Okay.
So then when you start on this design project, the two key people are the director and the producer. And this is just like film. Films will have a director and a producer. So the director is also known as the creative director or the art director, depending on the company. That's the person who is concerned about the creative design of the park. That's the Mark Davis. That's the Tony Baxter. But working alongside them is the producer. And like I said, these are design teams that have dozens, even hundreds of people. So there's a lot of organization that needs to go into it. There's budgets that need to be handled. There's research that needs to be undertaken. And that's what the producer does. The producer does all of the business planning and everything to allow the director to focus on the creativity. And you might recognize that dynamic of creative and business mind in Walt Disney and Roy Disney as well.
Exactly. Yes, we've talked about that. How they balanced each other out, and
Exactly.
we're both geniuses in their own right to create, the entertainment empire that they did.
Yeah. So then what happens is they put together the design team. And now what people might not realize is theme park designer isn't really a job title. It's kind of a job category. And there are 140 different disciplines that go into theme park design. And that can be everything from illustration to R&D to media design to costume design to audio design to painting to planning to architecture. There's loads. There's the 140. That's a lot. And the producer and the director will work together to pull together a team that works well for the type of attraction that they're going to create. Then the actual design process itself, or process, or should I say, should Americanize it?
Oh no, because I can tell you right now, I'm going to hear all about how wonderful your accent is. So we will have a lot of young ladies writing it.
I'll keep with the English accent there. Although I have to say that there is one word that I do say the American way. I always now say progress instead of progress, which is how I should say it, and that's purely because of Walt Disney's Carousel of Progress.
Yes.
I've heard that name since I was a kid, so I thought that's how it was pronounced. I didn't realize I was doing something wrong.
Well, it's like I think most of us say Caribbean, except when we talk about Pirates of the Caribbean.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. So where was I? So the design process. Really, there are about 8 stages, which are split across 3 design segments, and those segments are design, delivery, and operation. So design is where you put it on paper. Delivery is where you build it in reality. And operation is once you've opened the attraction. So let's go back. If I go back to the example of late 60s, Magic Kingdom, we're going to do a Magic Kingdom. The parks have just come to you, Michael. They want a new Fantasyland attraction. They want it based around a classic Disney film. This is where we begin the very first design phase, which is blue sky design, which is where you come up with as many ideas as you can. You don't critique them. You just come up with as many as you can. What Disney films would you want?
Oh, what? Well, my favorite is Pinocchio, but there already is one. So how about Bambi?
Bambi? Yeah. Or, well, as many different ideas as possible. So we could have 101 Dalmatians. We could have Sleepy Hollow. We could have Sleeping Beauty.
Sleepy Hollow, because I think there actually was going to be one in the Magic Kingdom, and then it got canceled.
Well, yeah, actually, there's a really interesting story about that. So if you remember how I said there's a difference between the manifestation theme and the dramatic theme, it's really interesting when they went to design Fantasyland for the Magic Kingdom, because they knew they had these old the original Fantasyland dark rides with Snow White and Peter Pan and Mr. Toad. But the reason they chose those 3 is because they wanted one attraction to be wild and crazy, which was Mr. Toad. They wanted one attraction to be scary, which was Snow White. And they wanted one attraction to be magical, which was Peter Pan. And when they went to build the Magic Kingdom, they wanted that mixture of dramatic themes, how you're supposed to feel. They wanted to keep that. But the manifestation theme, they realized they could mix that up a bit. So that's when they were going to do a Sleepy Hollow ride, but that Sleepy Hollow ride was going to be the scary attraction instead of Snow White.
Mm-hmm.
And they were going to have 101 Dalmatians. Was it 100? Yeah, which was going to be the Wild and Crazy ride, and they were going to have Sleeping Beauty as the magical ride. But various things happened to go back to the original lineup. But it's really interesting that that's what they consider.
Yeah, we had Rolly Crump on the Disneyland show, and he talked about that. And that also there was going to be a Mary Poppins ride
Oh yes,
as
yeah,
well.
absolutely. So after we go through blue sky design, that's when we go into concept design. So this is where we take a handful of the attractions. So we might have made a list of, I don't know, 24 rides that we wanted to build. And now we go and think, okay, we're going to pick a couple of these. We're going to pick, what did you say? You wanted Bambi, you wanted Sleepy Hollow. And we'd look at those in more detail. So we'd begin to think about, okay, well, what kind of ride scenes would we see in this attraction? What type of ride system would it be? Would it be a bus bar ride like Snow White? Would it be a suspended ride like Peter Pan? How would we want the guests to feel? How much space would we have? All different things like that. And we plan out a couple of different ones of these, because at all of these stages, you have to go back to the client and ask, what do you think? What are you interested in? What works for you? And like I said before, the operator might be working from different things. They might realize that we want this attraction to appeal to young children. So that might be why they go for the Bambi ride instead of the Sleepy Hollow ride.
Mm-hmm.
So the next stage is feasibility, which is where we look at these attractions and think, okay, are they feasible? Can we build them for the designated budget? Can we build them in the time frame that we have? Are they going to have enough capacity to be able to make sure enough people can ride them? And loads of different studies go into all of this. There might be a new technology that you want to put in the ride, and you're going to have to build that up, even at full scale, to make sure it works properly. Are the illusions that you're going to put in going to work? All of this has to be checked to see to see whether you can do what you're planning to do. At the end of that, that's finally when you choose which attraction you're going to go for. And then you head into the delivery segment. So we've done all of the design. We've figured out what we want to achieve. Now we have to try and achieve it. And the first part of that is schematic design, which is where you go into some very specific detail, deciding exactly what is needed and exactly where it's going to go. So you have to decide, what is your ride vehicle going to be? How many people is it going to hold? How big are all of the rooms, all of the scenes in the attraction going to be? Where's the queue going to go? How big does the building need to be? What color paint are you going to have? All of these things have to be decided in very specific detail. After that, you then go into design development. And in that stage, all of that stuff is put on paper. So that's where you put together the blueprints, the color plans, the scripts for what you want the dialogue to be. All of this has to be put on paper so you can send it out for the next design phase, which is build. And that's where you send out the plans to the person you've hired to construct it, and they're gonna fabricate the project elements you need. They're gonna construct the buildings, and they're going to install everything so it works. And that takes a long time. But after that, when you finally built it, you can then go into the third design segment, which is operation. And you hand over the completed project to the operator, and you have your opening day. And so people have to remember that Walt Disney Imagineering design the attractions, but they don't operate them. And this is what happens with a lot of design companies. There will be a lot of independent design companies who are hired by a theme park to design an attraction, but once they've built it and handed it over, they don't have any involvement in that attraction unless the park invites them back to maybe do a refurb or something along those lines. Except for one thing, and that's the very last design phase, which is sustainment. And that's where you have to ensure that the creative integrity of the project is maintained after opening. So for a small company, that might be putting together a theme book, which is a book which details all of the design decisions that were made, why they were made. Because you have to remember, it might be 10 years down the line, and someone goes, "Oh, you see that wall over there? It's fading a bit. We should paint it." But then they might ask, "Well, what color should we paint it?" And there might have been a reason that the original designers chose that color 10 years ago. And without that theme book, without something documenting why the decisions were made, that would be lost. And so that's something that the designer has to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've even seen some of Alice Davis's theme books where she even has swatches of the material for the costumes and everything just attached to it.
Yeah, even the types of glitter and everything.
Yeah. Now, for attractions that have backstories that the guests may not know about, are the backstories included in these theme books?
Absolutely. A theme book will typically it'll begin with like maybe a quick elevator pitch of what the attraction is like. But then the second category will be the story, everything that happens to you in it, but then also everything that went on, the backstory, as you say, everything, even if it's not communicated to the guest in the ride, the designer will include it. Because if anyone wants to make changes in the future, they'll want to know why certain decisions were made. And this is kind of like, if you ever hear about actors or authors of books talking about plotting out backstories for their characters, even if they're not put in the book themselves. This is exactly the same with designers. We need to know why things are the way they are so that they make sense to us, mm-hmm. and also make sense to other people.
So now, let's say that our attraction, the Sleepy Hollow attraction, is installed. It's up and running. How does the park determine it's successful? Is it simply by the length of the queue, or is there more of a formula that goes into this?
Well, the length of the queue is probably the worst way of determining the success of an attraction, unless no one goes to it. That's a pretty bad sign. But really, if you think about the length of the queue, you might have an attraction which only takes 200 people per hour. So it's THRC, its theoretical hourly ride capacity is 200 people. But if 1,000 people want to go on it, that queue is going to be huge. And you probably think, wow, that's a really successful attraction. But if you compare that to an attraction like Pirates of the Caribbean, that attraction's THRC is 4,000 people per hour. So even if you have 4,000 people that want to go on it every hour, there won't be a queue. And so just going by the length of the queue is a really bad indicator because it doesn't take into account the attraction's capacity. And so because of that, there's a lot of other different ways you have to figure out whether it's been successful. Some of those might be guest satisfaction surveys. So designers will actually go and ask the guests, what did you think of it? What was your favorite ride in the park? It might be attendance growth. It might be how many more people come to the theme park because they've heard this new awesome attraction is opening up. It might be the percentage of the gate, which is what percentage of people that go to the theme park that day wanted to go on the ride. There's lots of different ways of doing it. One of the most all-encompassing, though, is the cost per guest satisfaction. So basically, one of my friends calls this the happiness per buck, which is basically you look at how much you spent on that ride, then you compare that to how many people in your park think that the ride is awesome. You do what they would rate it 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. And from that, you can calculate whether it was worth it.
Huh, okay, interesting. So now we've sort of focused on designing theme park attractions and all that, but actually people that design theme parks, they're not just limited to designing lands or attractions. What other types of projects do theme designers work on?
Well, really, you can apply theme design to almost anything. And this is what a lot of the independent design companies do. But even Disney, even Universal, and even Merlin will do this. So if you look at a hotel at a resort, that'll be a themed hotel. If you look at a cruise ship, you can make that a themed cruise ship. You can have a restaurant and make that into a themed restaurant. there's all different sorts. There's stores, there's water parks, there's events, there's exhibits. There are even hospitals where designers will volunteer their time to go and theme a ward, a children's ward, for example, so it's a much more pleasant place to be.
Yeah, so people who are interested in this, this as a career, don't have to limit themselves to just Disney parks. There's so much that you can apply this, your expertise and talent too. I know that some folks associated with Walt Disney Imagineering, they were either current or past cast members, helped design the Walt Disney Family Museum in San Francisco. So there's all kinds of things. I know when I went on a tour, Disney World a while back, they had the layout for a museum exhibit that they were helping design. So for Japan, so it's interesting. Now let's say that an attraction has stood for generations, largely unchanged. How does, I don't know, the theme park manager or the designers determine if money should be invested in updating or plussing that attraction, or simply closing it down, or or replacing it with another?
Well, that's a big question. It really depends on the attraction itself. So sometimes there might be a new attraction that you want to put in the park, and there's no space for it, so you have to take up the space of something that's already there. Or there might be a new technology that comes out, and the designer realizes, oh, we could do something even better with this attraction if we just change a few things. A major part of it is that you have to remember that theme parks are a business, and the cost of running all of these attractions can get really high, to the degree that sometimes if you want to put in a new attraction, which is going to cost a lot of money to run, you might need to close an older attraction so that you have the money to be able to do so. And typically that'll be, well, which attraction isn't getting the attendance that it once used to? Which attraction isn't getting guest feedback that it once used to? And sometimes there will be a way of doing something new with it, and sometimes it's a good idea, if people aren't going to see it, to use that money for something that they will go and see.
Okay, and so that's why Disneyland no longer has Country Bear Jamboree, but we do have Winnie the Pooh. and our Disney Worlders could say the same about Mr. Toad.
But you've got to recognize that the amount of people that love Winnie the Pooh is huge, and if Disney have that property, they should put it in the park if they can do something good with it.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Yeah. And that brings up another question, and it relates back to something you stated before, where when Disneyland first opened, 60% of the rides were not based on intellectual property. Now, and I don't know if this is, well, of course, with Universal, everything's based on intellectual property, but it seems now at Disney, and I don't know if this is true in other parks, everything is based on intellectual property, and things that were based on an original idea, like Haunted Mansion, Pirates of the Caribbean, it seems like we just don't see those anymore. And is that just economics? Is that the way it's going to be in the field of theme park design, that everything has to have its built-in audience, being based on a film?
Well, we shouldn't ignore that even Disney have been opening things like Mystic Manor and Big Grizzly Mountain in the past few years, which aren't based on existing intellectual property. But really, when you look at it from the designer's point of view, a designer needs to hit a bunch of different targets when they're trying to convince an operator to give them the money that they need to build a new attraction. And it might be that it needs it needs to have a ride system that's going to be guaranteed to work. So if you want to do a brand new ride system that's never been tried before, that's a bit risky, and that might decrease your chances of it being built. If you want to push the budget a bit more and add an extra 20% onto the construction budget, that's a bit risky, and the client might not allow that. But if you can tie that into an intellectual property which is being proved to work, that people love it, that decreases the risk a little bit for both the designer and the operator. And that's one of the reasons that they like to do it. But another reason as well as that, though, is differentiation. um, anyone could do a Pirates Land, but only Disney could do a Pirates of the Caribbean land. And that's a really important thing. Disney could do something that's that is just pirates with no names or places with no names. But if they go with Jack Sparrow and Davy Jones, there's an identification there that people know about these stories and they want to go to these places, and that's a benefit. That's a draw that a regular non-Pirates of the Caribbean pirate land wouldn't have. And of course, there's a balance to this. We want to have brand new stories that work just for the theme park. A good example I give is that imagine if you were a movie studio that only made films based on books. Now, you might have some really good films like Harry Potter, but at the same time, you're going to be missing out on making a load of films which are perfect for cinema alone that wouldn't work in written format. And it's the same with the theme park. Some rides are brilliant if they are based on existing films and TV shows and books, but other attractions are really good if they're just custom made for the theme park.
Okay, and you brought up Harry Potter, and we saw, and there was a section in your book that I found really interesting about brands and how sometimes parks go beyond their brand, they go outside their brands. We saw this at Universal where they bought the rights for Harry Potter, even though they didn't produce those films. And we've seen what's been somewhat a little controversial when Disney purchased Star Wars and Marvel, because people said, well, they have enough of their own intellectual property they've created. Why go out and purchase these franchises and now build attractions based on those instead of on their own fairy tales and all that? But you make a really good case in your book for why theme parks should reach out beyond their brands.
Yeah, I mean, there are quite a few reasons for this. I think the one that appeals to me most. Well, actually, let me just. I'll switch us to something else for a second. You have to remember that in the 80s, when Star Wars got added to the theme park, and later in the 1990s when Indiana Jones got added to the theme park, they weren't Disney at the time. But nowadays, if I went to Disneyland and couldn't go on the Indiana Jones adventure, I would be so upset. It really suits it. And that's the important thing. It doesn't matter if the property was made in-house, as long as it matches the manifestation, the dramatic theme, of the theme park. Now, Star Wars really makes you feel. It really makes you feel good about life. It makes you think that good will triumph over evil, and that's exactly what Disneyland does as well. There's a synergy there that can be built on. And Tony Baxter, who's the designer that was behind the original Star Tours and behind the Indiana Jones adventure, he said to a 7-year-old doesn't care whether it was Paramount that produced Star Wars or that it was 20th Century Fox that made Star Wars. They just know that they know the characters and they want to see for a 7-year-old to see those characters in the theme park is really magical. And that's the thing that this intellectual property has. It has designers call them cues, 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 and these are like icons and characters and places and events in the world that we know about and that we can hook into without it needing to be established in the park. If we see Darth Vader, we know all about his history and where he's come from and what he's like, and that resonates with us a lot more than something that's made brand new.
Okay, yeah, and I think Disney's won over folks now with Marvel and Star Wars. So.
I think you're right. I mean, there are some times where an IP wouldn't fit. But I think Disney are doing a pretty good job, and Universal as well. Universal's picking a lot of good IPs like Harry Potter and King Kong and Marvel, which are huge right now. These are really cool worlds that we want to step into, and the theme park enables people to do that.
It seems now too we see attractions go through different trends. For instance, original attractions, it seemed like, when Disneyland first opened, were basically passive rides. We just experienced the attractions as the designers guided us through them, like, Haunted Mansion and Pirates. But then there was a trend of interactive attractions there for a while. At Disney parks, it was Buzz Lightyear's Astro Blasters, Toy Story Midway Mania, Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor. Then the high def video came into being that we saw, like with when they reimagined Alice in Wonderland at Disneyland, or the Harry Potter attractions at the Universal parks. And now it seems like the trend is going back to the passive rides again, like the Voyage of the Little Mermaid, the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. So is it that these trends are just brief, or do designers just stick with what's tried and true, what is happening in the field?
Well, really, it's because designers are constantly looking out for new things that they can bring into the theme park, and most often that's driven by technology. So designers will be going to the aerospace industry and engineering and finding out what new technology is there, and then how could we adapt this for the theme park? How could we add a story to this so that it stops being just technology and becomes something magical? But in addition to that, though, there are also just tastes in what people like, and what the designers like, and what the operators like. And I have a section in my book about this. If you look at like the theming of Disneyland in the 1950s, that's very different to the theming of Disneyland in the 2000s, and the theming of Epcot, for example, is very different to the theming of Universal Studios, because they're all trying to achieve all these different things. And because of that, they'll go to different sources to be able to achieve this. So it varies a lot, but it's always about doing something new. Even with the passive rides, for example, designers will try and bring in new technology, like the animatronics in The Little Mermaid are amazing. New technology there, and even the Seven Dwarf Mine Train, those swinging carts are a really cool idea. That's something brand new. So it's very, people don't want to repeat the past. They're always trying to look for something new. And if a lot of different designers are all kind of battling to be the very first person to do that, maybe you'll get a few attractions at once which are all kind of similar in that way.
Okay. And another thing that's sort of controversial, and I think amongst guests, is there are parks like the Disney parks, Universal parks, they're in California and they're in Florida, and an attraction will be popular in either Florida or California, and then they'll build it in the other park, the counterpart park. Some people are thrilled because it means, oh good, it's in the park we go to. Others are disappointed because they say, well then, why should I go to another park, because they're duplicating them? So from a theme park designer's point of view, what's the pros and cons of duplicating attractions?
Well, designers call this lifting or cloning, or sometimes they call it rollout. And this is where you create the plans for an attraction that could be built anywhere. And there are obviously some obvious benefits of that. If you're designing an attraction for two different parks simultaneously, then that means that your design budget is split in two. And that means that you've got more money to do better effects. For example, if I'm building one ride in California and one ride in Florida, the operators of both of those parks will be pooling their money. And that means you could get a better attraction than you could if it was just going to appear in one park. There might be attractions, and it's all a balance, but there might be attractions that are so successful that there is a demand for them in the other resort. I'm sure you'll know the story about how Pirates of the Caribbean wasn't originally in the Magic Kingdom. Right. And the Imagineers at the time thought that, well, we're so close to the Caribbean here, it won't have as much mystique as Pirates do to those in California. but how good Pirates of the Caribbean was, everyone in Florida knew about it and were disappointed when it didn't appear there. So they had to build it. And I know if I went to a Disney resort that didn't have Pirates of the Caribbean nowadays, I'd be upset. So that's an attraction that you want to be able to put into multiple parks.
Right. Some attractions become franchises themselves,
Exactly.
like the Haunted Mansion, It's a Small World, Peter Pan, and Pirates. So they're just expected to be in this example in Disney parks. But I imagine other parks have their own franchises. It sounds like Universal, the Wizarding World of Harry Potter is now its franchise that they're going to have to build in every Universal park. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's even more than that as well. There are even independent design companies that will create franchise attractions that aren't for any specific park at all. So there might be some independent family-owned park in the middle of the countryside in the United Kingdom, and they don't have the money to create a big dark ride by themselves. But if they go to this company and pool their money with a bunch of other theme parks around the world, maybe one's in America, one's in Canada, one's in Germany, together they can design an attraction that they can each put into their park that would be much better than if they were trying to go it alone.
Huh, interesting. And that allows them to compete with the larger parks as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, another trend that we're seeing is like when Disneyland first opened in one of their realms, like Fantasyland, there were different attractions all based on fantasy but didn't really relate to each other. Now we're seeing with the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, Cars Land, and all that, where the whole land is based on one intellectual property. Is this a current trend? Or is this the new direction of themed entertainment? And are there risks associated with having a whole land based on one intellectual property?
Well, what you've identified there is a thing called land theme, and that can be split into two types. So you have amalgamated lands, which put their focus on the dramatic theme, and specific lands, which put their focus on the manifestation theme. So like you said, Fantasyland, that's an amalgamated land based around the dramatic theme of fantasy. And Pinocchio, which is, Italian, and Snow White, which is German, and Dumbo, which is American, or 1940s American. These don't fit very well in terms of a manifestation theme, but they do fit together as part of a dramatic theme. They all make you feel like the fantastical is possible. And that's one way of grouping attractions together. Adventureland does the same. It's got Victorian Africa. It's got 1940s India. It's got Polynesia. All of these different things that all together can combine towards the dramatic theme of adventure. Now, if you compare that to specific lands will take just one place and time and stick exclusively to that. So like you say, Harry Potter is just Hogsmeade in contemporary times. And that is becoming more common. People might be surprised here that the very first time Disney did this was actually, it wasn't Cars Land, it wasn't Toy Story Land, it was actually back in 2001 with Mermaid Lagoon at Tokyo Disney Sea. That was the first ever land that Disney did that was all based around one film, and in that case it was The Little Mermaid. But going even further back than that, lots of other theme parks did the same thing earlier. Universal Studios did it in 1990 with Amity, which is based around Jaws. And even before that, Knott's Berry Farm did it with Snoopy as part of Camp Snoopy. And there are benefits and drawbacks to both of them. But like you say, there are a lot more specific lands being built. And really, I actually take that as a really good sign. Now, I'd be upset if amalgamated lands disappeared entirely, but what specific lands allow you to do is, rather than just having one pirate attraction in Adventureland, you can make an entire pirates land. And I love pirates. That's probably my favorite theme. So the ability to not only go on Pirates of the Caribbean, but then to be able to go into a pirate tavern, or to be able to go and explore a pirate island and have that experience last not just the 15 minutes of a ride, but maybe an hour or two of a land. That really appeals to me. And because theme parks are doing so well, and there are so many theme parks around the world, theme parks can latch onto these different themes and really go for them, really do something special with them.
So is it Shanghai Disneyland that's supposed to have a whole land based on pirates?
It is. I can't wait to see it.
So, and I assume you already have your own designs for a pirate-themed land.
I think I designed a pirate land when I was about 5 years old.
Oh my goodness. And then I think of what I was doing at 5, and you're designing themed lands, you know.
Well, I don't know how original it was at the time.
So now on Connecting with Walt, we're approaching, as I said earlier in the show, the time period in Disney history where we're going to start talking about the efforts to construct the Magic Kingdom. So after building Disneyland, did the designers take a different approach when they sat down and said, okay, we need to begin working on designing the Magic Kingdom?
Well, you have to imagine the culture at Disney at the time. So Walt's dream had been for the city. And so a lot of the Imagineers who had been, it's crazy when you think about it, these individuals that had been designing little bus bar rides through Snow White scary forests were now being asked to design an entire city of the future. So they were looking at loads of different influences that just didn't occur to them when they were designing Disneyland California just a decade or two before. So there was a lot going in their mind that was very different. Now, like, some of the decisions they made were because of the new culture that they were going into. So in Florida, they had a lot more land, so that changed a lot of the design decisions they were going to make. They had some new intellectual property, that changed the design decisions they were made. For like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, they were able to do an entire attraction around that they didn't have the time to do at Disneyland. They were able to look at all of the mistakes that Disneyland made and correct for them. They realized that there were going to be loads more people coming to Florida that weren't going to go to California, so they could make the walkways wider, for example, or change the types of food that they served in the restaurants. All of these different things were on their mind when they were going to design something. And these are the design decisions that go into any theme park that is being built from scratch. If you look at Shanghai Disneyland, all of the decisions they made that go into there are very different than decisions they were going to that go into making a park in Florida.
Interesting. So let's say I know you're familiar with the attractions that never got built at Disney World. Is there one that, let's say you were the head of the parks for one day, which attraction would you green light?
You mean of the attractions that got cancelled?
Yes.
Oh, can I cheat and go back to those Fantasyland dark rides?
Sure.
Because I would have loved to have had a Sleeping Beauty dark ride and a Sleepy Hollow dark ride and a Mary Poppins dark ride in Fantasyland. I just think they were magical, and it's really interesting actually as well. If you look at the decades that different Imagineers were kind of at the top of their game in terms of how long they've been at the company and so on. It's very interesting that when the first generation of Imagineers began to retire, at around the time Epcot opened, Epcot was kind of their last big project, and then they thought, okay, now it's time to retire. As soon as the second generation of Imagineers came in, they kind of looked back at some of the rides that existed when they were little kids going into Disneyland, and they kind of went, you know what? I want to design one of those rides. I mean, we've had fun helping the original Imagineers design Epcot. We want to go back and design some of those fun storybook dark rides. And I think that's why Pinocchio's the Pinocchio ride at Disneyland got built, because the second generation of Imagineers finally got to make the decisions and decided, we enjoyed that so much, we want to build one too. And I think I would be exactly the same if I was in their shoes.
Yeah, and maybe that's one of the reasons they're building international parks, is because it gives them that opportunity to build to build those attractions that they loved, but put their own spin on it.
Absolutely, I think you're right, because if you have to look back at Disneyland got built up over decades and decades and decades, and that meant that even if the perfect space for one attraction would have been here, there isn't room for that there, so we're going to have to build it over here. But when you go and build another theme park from scratch, you get to correct those and make it even better every single time.
Now, you brought up Epcot Center earlier in the show, and this was the first Disney park without a castle that the Imagineers designed and built. And you said, that had a totally different theme, as you mentioned. How did they approach this? Because, there was always the Epcot, the city. And so when they were told, okay, we've got to start working on this, I mean, how did they get themselves going?
Well, really, the Imagineers invented a whole new archetype of theme park when they designed Epcot. And by archetype of theme park, I mean there's a couple of different styles of theme park that you see repeat quite a lot. So Disneyland and the Magic Kingdom, they're a type of theme park called an excursion park. An excursion park it pulls together a bunch of diverse lands which are pretty loosely related to each other, but they're all really fun places to go, and pulls them all into one place together, and that's your theme park. And Islands of Adventure is another example of this. Islands of Adventure has got Marvel Superhero Island and Jurassic Park and Harry Potter and Dr. Seuss. And they don't really go together, but they're really cool places. And I want to go to them. So let's put them all in one place and open it up as a theme park. So that's an excursion park. With Epcot, though, they invented this thing called a Discovery Park. And a Discovery Park, instead of taking its inspiration from story films, Discovery Park takes its inspiration from documentary films. So instead of trying to tell you these fantastical fictional stories, it tries to show you the actual world you live in, and that's a really different approach. So unlike the reassurance that Disneyland or the Magic Kingdom was going to give you, Epcot was going to inspire you. It was going to educate you, and it was going to let you have fun whilst you did it. And it was really based on the World's Fairs and on exhibition, and even museum design went into it. And that entirely changed the approach that they took with attractions, because they were trying to show the real world. For example, let's say you wanted to create a China pavilion. Now you could recreate the Great Wall, I suppose. You could try and rebuild a section of it to give you kind of some impression of what it was like, and that would be perfect for an excursion park, for a fictional story. But when you're trying to do the real thing, that doesn't really do it justice, and that's why Epcot relied a lot on film attractions, because they allowed people to see the real thing. And also it allowed Epcot to constantly update things, or that was the plan. So things wouldn't grow stale, and they could keep up with the cultures in a way that Disneyland doesn't need to do. Disneyland admits everything as a story. At Epcot, everything is real.
That is interesting. And I always wondered why they relied so much on film. But you're right. If they had intended to update them every once in a while, they need to get going here. In the France Pavilion, they now refer to the film as a nostalgic look back at our, anyway. But now, I think now for our younger Disneyers who are listening, if they had any desire to be a theme park designer, I have a feeling after listening to you, they want to know a lot more about how to become a theme park designer. So you talked a little about how you got on that road, but let's say you were advising a younger person as to how they could reach this goal. What kind of advice did you give them in terms of education, practical experience, personal experience, things like that?
Well, I have to go back to what I said before and say that theme park designer isn't a specific job title, it's a category of job titles. So almost anything you can think of can be applied to theme parks. So the best thing to do is to find out what you love and just try and become one of the best at it. And at some point, you'll be able to apply that to a theme park and be able to adapt your skill set. And even then, once you're inside a theme park company, you can go out and try different things. And you can start learning from other people in other disciplines and find out how they do what they do. As well as that, though, you should you should look into industry organizations. Such as the Themed Entertainment Association and the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions. And these have really, really good student bodies, which will allow you to attend industry events and interact with actual designers who can give you advice and look at the work you've done so far and give you comments and feedback and hopefully guide you to the job that is best suited for you one day. The only thing, though, is it's quite difficult. You shouldn't try and aim just to be a theme park designer, because the skill set that goes into theme park design can be applied to so many different things. It's better to find what you love to do and then find out what you can apply that to.
I think that's excellent advice. What you have a passion for, and then channel that passion, into, if you have a passion for something, become an expert at it, and the money and everything's going to follow.
Absolutely.
So,
and I also think a really good piece of advice would be to look at my book as well.
Well, I was going to bring that up, because in your book, you said there were 140 different disciplines within theme park design, and I could see someone saying, well, how would I ever learn about all these disciplines? Actually, your book covers them pretty well in that if you want to learn about it. I mean, even when you talked about the design team, I mean, it is lighting gets into it. Horticulture is part of the design team. I mean, things you'd never thought about, is in there. Music, all kinds of things are all part of a design team. So I want you to tell us a little more about your book, David, the theme park design and the art of themed entertainment. In that, tell us about what we can find in it. How is it organized, and other interesting topics.
Well, on the back cover, I describe it as three things. I describe it as a handbook for the practicing designer. Mm-hmm. I describe it as a textbook for the enthusiastic student, and I describe it as a behind-the-scenes guidebook for the interested fan. Mm-hmm. And really, I hope that I hit all three of those targets. Basically, the book is, as the title says, it's how to design a theme park. And it goes through pretty much everything that I know about theme park design, right the way from the history of theme parks, up to the design process, up to the business model of the industry, then onto theme, and onto story, and onto design techniques. And then I break it down for the final three chapters in applying those to theme park design, to land design, and to attraction design. And
this isn't just for, I really want to reiterate, this isn't just for people who want to become professionals in the industry. This book has a lot of layers to it, and what I found for myself is I can get into it. I can find whatever I'm interested in it. As David said, if you want to design your own theme park, this is the book for you. You'll know how to do it by the time you finish it. So it's definitely for people in the industry who want to get into the industry. It's an excellent book. For students, an excellent book. But for me, who just has I'm just sort of curious how things work or what goes into it. There were just sections that I just sort of opened the book, and I love fireworks. I almost never miss the fireworks, pageant at parks. David has a whole section in here on how they put a fireworks show together. and which is another part of theme design, and even the different types of bursts and all that, which I found really fascinating. And I love parades. And again, there's a whole section in here. If you just like to know what goes into putting a parade together, there's a whole section in there, a whole chapter in there for you on it. So even if you're just a casual guest, there's things in this book that you will find interesting. So.
I'm really glad you said that, because that's definitely something I was aiming for. This isn't a book where you're going to read it from cover to cover. I think it's there's so much there that I don't think that would be the best way of doing it. But I actually got advice from Tony Baxter, who's I think hopefully a lot of your listeners will know who he is. He certainly deserves to be known, and he said that I should break up the book as much as possible into subheadings and just so that you can flick through and you can find something that you're interested in, and then it will say see page blah blah blah. So then you can go on this trail and then learn about something else, and then that will lead you on another trail to learn about something else. But these are all quite small segments that together build up the entirety of the theme park industry. And it's things like if you know about forced perspective, for example, or about the berm around Disneyland, or about the hub and spoke, the hub and spoke layout, sorry, there are these concepts that a lot of theme park fans know about, but there's only maybe like half a dozen, maybe a dozen of them. My book goes into a lot more than that. I think my favorite section of the book for me is a section called Design Techniques, which lists 52 different techniques that designers use on parks, on lands, and on attractions. That do kind of, they're basically like tricks of the trade that most people don't realize when they're in the park. Bob Gurr, who I hope a lot of your listeners know as well, he gave me some really good feedback about the book. He said that typically designers would only learn about this by word of mouth. It's only by being in the workshop while something is designed. That's the only place you'd hear about it. But now he says for the first time, these are all written down, so anyone who has an interest in the theme park can learn about. So if you know about, say, you know about intrusions, don't you, Michael?
I know a bit, but I don't know if everybody listening does.
So an intrusion is something that's outside the park that you see from inside the park that ruins it, essentially. So, for example, if you were in Frontierland and you looked up above the trees and you could see a big modern hotel tower, that would completely ruin it, and that would be an intrusion. And so lots of designers will work in lots of different techniques in order to hide those. And I think some people will know about those. But do many people know about extrusions?
Probably not.
So an extrusion. This is something that I haven't read in any theme park design book that I've come across before. But an extrusion, if an intrusion is something outside the park you see in it, an extrusion is something inside the park that you see outside of it. And these are carefully controlled by designers as well. So, for example, Sleeping Beauty Castle at Disneyland, California, was kept very small so that you wouldn't see it from outside the park. So that magic would be would be withheld until you go up Main Street, USA. But the Matterhorn, that is an extrusion. That's something that you see from miles away as you're going down the freeway, and you can spot on the horizon and go, oh, look, we're almost there. And that's the power of an extrusion. Sometimes they can be really good, sometimes they can be really bad, but that's a design technique that not many people know about, but it is something that's in theme parks all the time.
Yeah, so see, Disney Worlders, it's not that our castle is small, it is magical.
Well, the thing is, Disney Worlders should be really proud of how their castle was designed, because it's designed to be an extrusion when you're at the Transportation and Ticket Center, But as you get closer to the park, the castle disappears behind the train station. So it's no longer an extrusion anymore. So you still have that feeling of wonder as you go through the gates and up onto Main Street, USA. You see it really far in the distance as an extrusion, which kind of whets your appetite. Then the middle ground, they hide it from you, and only then when you're close up do they reveal it again. It's incredibly well designed.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I knew why it was an extrusion, but it didn't occur to me that as you approached the park, you couldn't see it anymore. But and if you're somebody that enjoys doing the backstage tours like at Disney World, and for me learning more how they do things makes it more magical for me. For others, learning how things are done removes the magic. But so if you like to know, if you're someone that says, I wonder how they did that, David has a whole section on special effects. And that I found fascinating. Sometimes how simply some of the special effects are carried out, and then others just how complicated it is. That just, it was a lot of fun reading. So for me, that was worth the price of the book. So, but anyway, so David, we've been talking a lot about the book. So our listeners now, they're ready to get it. So how can they purchase your book, Theme Park Design and the Art of Themed Entertainment?
Well, currently it's not quite out yet, but it's on the final stages of being complete. So the best thing to do to find out when I finally do manage to get it published is to go to the Facebook page, which is www.facebook.com/theme park design book, or go to the Twitter page, which is twitter.com/theme park design. Or both of those can be accessed by the website, which is www.themeparkdesignbook.com. And that's where I'll be putting all the updates on getting it finally completed. But then I'm also posting things like endorsements that I've received from received for the book. So, like I said, it's perfect for a fan audience, and it's perfect for the student audience. But I should also say that this is a book that's being used by real theme park designers as well. I've got there are a bunch of theme park designers at Disney and at Universal and at numerous independent companies that either have a copy of this book already, one of the preview copies that I've sent out, or they've already got an order for one of the final copies. And I've received a lot of really good feedback from these people. I will say, as I said, the Disney theme park that hooked me when I was a child was Disneyland Paris. And Disneyland Paris the design of it was led by Tony Baxter, who also designed Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. He designed the original Journey into Imagination. He did Star Tours. He did Splash Mountain. He's just a genius of designer. And I'm incredibly proud to be able to say that he wrote the foreword for my book. So he's thought enough of it to be able to write these really kind words and a really personal story of his introduction to theme parks that opens my book. And then the conclusion of my book, the afterword, is written by Joe Rohde, who is a genius designer. He was the lead designer on Disney's Animal Kingdom. He also led the design of Expedition Everest. He's doing the Avatar attractions that are coming to Walt Disney World in the next few years. And again, he writes really kindly about my book. And then in addition, I've got a bunch of different theme park designers who've thrown their endorsements in as well. Bob Gurr, Garner Holt, who we mentioned earlier, and lots of people, not just Disney, but Universal Studios, SeaWorld, Merlin. This is a book that should hopefully be useful to anyone who's interested in how theme parks are made.
Excellent. And Craig is going to put links. All those links you mentioned will be in our show notes. And I'm sure once I hear the book is available, if you follow me on social media, I'll post something that you can get the book. So David, thank you so much for joining us on Connecting with Walt. And I'm confident that you have inspired many, fledgling theme park designers and those who want to learn more about the magic and mysteries behind their favorite theme parks. So
I I definitely hope so. I think, like I said, the textbook didn't exist when I wanted to read it. So now that it does exist, I hope lots of other people will want to read it too.
I hope so. So, Craig, are you?
Oh,
Craig,
I
are
am
you still there?
Yeah, no, I've just been taking this all in.
Oh,
It's great that I'm the first person who gets to hear this interview.
I know, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, I know. It's been really fascinating. So I've
Oh, absolutely.
enjoyed it. So, yeah, and what a wonderful end to our January episodes.
I know.
You know,
I
I know
think.
I've had a lot of fun putting together this month's Connecting with Walt.
Oh yeah, I think it's even more information filled, way more action packed than it was the first time around. So I'm pretty pumped by everything that we got to
Yeah,
cover the past couple weeks.
yeah, definitely. But as our new favorite nighttime Disneyland parade asks, I gotta know, my friends, when can we do this again? I never want this to end. I gotta know now. When can we do this again? So we will be back in April. And this time we're going to have 5 episodes, because we will be on every Friday in the month of April. The first episode's going to be on April 1st. So Craig, we're going to have to do something in keeping with that day's festivities.
Yeah, well, I, gosh, we're gonna have to really brainstorm on that one. We can either
I
make it
know.
really fun or it'll be fun. Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
do something fun. Yeah.
We can do a show on Six Flags.
Oh, I'll let you do that. I'll just sit back and be the engineer of it all.
Well, we can have David back. I'm sure he's familiar with Six Flags.
Oh no, that's it. That's an amusement park. Remember, it's not a theme park.
Yes, that's right.
Outside my area of expertise.
Oh, and David, of course, can people contact you through all of the social media links? Because I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who will want you to record their message on their voicemail.
Yeah, I contacted through Facebook or Twitter, or there's a contact form on my website as well.
Great. So thank you. And Craig, until we meet again in April, where can our listeners hear your golden vocal tones?
You can keep finding me on all of the podcasts that are offered on the Diz Unplugged podcast network, except for the Disneyland show, of course. So to check out any of those episodes, go to disunplug.com, and that's where you'll find me, as well as if you want to talk to me directly, go ahead and follow me on Twitter. I am Teleclaster on it. TELECLASHTER. That's where you'll be able to actually say anything to me if you really want to. And of course, I'll have a link to that and all of our social medias in the show notes page.
And you can find me every Sunday night on the Diz Unplugged podcast Disneyland edition with my good friends Tom Bell, Nancy Johnson, Mary Jo Mulatto Willie, and Tony Spatel, where we have lots of fun talking about Walt's Park, the first theme park, you heard it here, the definitive answer, that started it all, and all Southern California theme parks and the Walt Disney Family Museum. So listen to us live on Mixlr, Sundays at 7 p.m. Pacific Time, Disneyland time. You can download our 2 weekly shows from iTunes each Monday. If you'd like to listen to more shows on the history of Walt Disney, his studio, his Imagineers, and Disneyland, check out our Disneyland podcast archives for my Disney history episodes. And Craig, where can our listeners find these shows and more?
Again, look for all that at disunplug.com. Once you hit the main page of the website, you will see giant boxes that are where you'll find all of our shows and the archived episodes that go way, way back. And especially for Michael's Disneyland specific oriented episodes, we'll have links in the show notes to the most organized list of those.
Thank you. And you can send me messages at michael@wdwinfo.com. On Twitter, I'm at Michael Bowling 121. Facebook, I'm Michael Bowling. And Instagram, Michael Bowling the Diz. So thank you for making us a part of your day. And remember, I only hope that we don't lose sight of one thing, that it was all started by a man, Walt Disney, and his brother Roy. We'll see you in April.